Hello everyone, Tom10 Crafted here after another 1 year of riding on Spark. And today, after almost 13,000 kilometers on the bike, probably for the last time for this generation of Sparks, I will cover a few of the things which I noticed, as well as what upgrades have been made throughout those 2 years. Will be the end of the Spark series. We will begin from the front of the bike and move towards the rear. First things first, integrated cockpit. Some loves integrated headset, others hate it. I don't mind it, except the fact that once you remove the handlebars from the fork, it's really a pain to put everything back into place. There are a few fundamental things to take care of, from the aesthetic side of things to don't mess things up. From a visual standpoint, you have to make sure that the cables goes on top of the others. So once they go through the internal routing, you need to make sure that they will stack on top of each other. If you fail to do so, you will later notice that once you ride, you will see that one or the other just goes like this, which normally shouldn't happen. The brake hose goes at the top, then shifting cable, that's for the right side if you still have cable-driven shifter. On the right side, it's a bit more trickier because here we have 3 cables. In my case, you can see that the dropper and the rear shock cable housings are made not ideal, so that's why this one comes a bit off. Important thing to mention, you can see that those are a bit longer than it should be, but I made it purposefully that once I remove the handlebars and travel, I can connect everything easily to the luggage and do not require to remove the brake levers or any other levers from the handlebar, because it's a bit of a mess to do so. Other aesthetic thing is that those cables should go as much as possible underneath the handlebar stem, so that's the purpose of them being integrated, so it would look neat. In order to make sure that this stays in place, I can recommend you to connect it with zip tie underneath the stem, so that way they will all be connected into a single piece. Leaving aesthetic things aside, there are 2 other things which you have to take care of. First, when you put the handlebars on top of your headset, make sure that you do not push any of those housings. I did that in the past accidentally and I split the rear shock housing. It's been squeezed and the cable were stuck and it was hard to move there. So keep that in mind. Also, I noticed the same thing has happened for the brake housing, so if you do that uncarefully, it can backfire at you. It's nothing too much complicated, but it requires a bit of attention, so it's not a big of an issue. And the last thing is that I already broke one piece. This is internal ring for routing. Cable goes through that. It just broke firstly one part and then on the other. That was my fault, but when you leave the handlebars hanging and the cables are still going through these, they are very tiny. They are, I already broken it in yet another part. They are very fragile, so keep that in mind. Dated version of this ring is already more thought. I installed it, already see that it's beneficial. To wrap up the integrated headset, the only problem for me is to put everything into place. Other things like routing through the frame is not a problem at all. You just need to have some connector to guide the cable through, and it's just as easy as it sounds. For this type of looks, I can take and swallow that pill. Depending what brakes you have, either SRAM or Shimano, it kind of varies how successful you've been with the brakes, but XTR's 9100 are known to leak through a master cylinder, and that happened to my levers as well, so those are already at the warranty. Twin lock, I really love 3 positions version of it. It just does everything you need. Maybe you need to get used to the amount of levers, but for me, even the looks are fine. You should consider readjusting the angle if it's not comfortable for you. Some changes because it's not ergonomic for them. For me, it's just perfectly fine. Actually, this one is already in the warranty, but warranty things I will cover later in the video, as well as the upgrades which I've done to the bike. The fork, there are a lot of different opinions about Sid Select Ultimate or Sid Select Plus. For me, it worked fine. Lockout worked pretty much okay. I have few videos about covering how to set up the lockout and what issues in generally people has with it, and I will leave a link in the corner. As long as you don't forget to release the lockout when you ride and you service it properly, it's okay. It's not that big of an issue, and if it is, that means you are doing something wrong with it. I have zero complaints about the integrated rear shock. Actually, I love the fact how the bike looks like, and at the same time, it's not problematic at all to do everything on your own. Yes, if the shock is outside, it's a lot easier to work with it, but that inside thing, it's so minor that you work with these pivots very easily because we are connected inside the frame. At that pivot, rear shock connects, and then it just fits here with the trunnion. It's not problematic at all, and the fact that the shock is isolated from the outside surroundings, the mud, humidity, it's worth a bit of a struggle to work with because it's not so big of an issue. Now the bike is without bottom bracket, and yes, I had Kogel ceramic bearings, and yes, they are removed for now. I will do an update later in the future about them. I will just install casual Shimano ones and move forward with that. About suspension in general, well, I was not really happy with that bottom part, the chainstay, because I replaced the bearings in those 2 years like 4 or 5 times for this part. Because, well, the bearings just get busted there really fast. You can definitely open them up, clean up, re-grease it, and they will work for some time. Personally, I just remove them and forget them, other than worrying that they will start causing some rattle of forces. I don't want that, and it's just simpler to replace the bearings, well, at least for me. Talking about longevity of the bearings and the whole suspension elements, it really depends where you ride, how you ride, what conditions, whether it's dry, whether it's wet, how much care do you put to it, whether you open it up from time to time to clean, or you just go until it starts rattling and you then figure out that it's problematic. Well, it's up to your taste, so I'm not going too much in depth about that. As long as you keep it well maintained, it's not problematic at all, and it's like no issues whatsoever. Talk about the flaws of design, maybe there are 2 of them. One is at the main pivot, where it's very easily attracts dirt and then makes scratches. Maybe I was just unlucky, but the scratches are everywhere around them. Other thing is that under this cover, it attracts dirt and then scratches the Swingarm. In the past, I added few different tapes here, but it was already after the fact. There is scratch here. Talk about scratches, there are a lot of them on the bike, but they are just minor ones. Even though I applied the protective tape after 1 season, it didn't work ideally, but it's still better than nothing. It works perfectly on the top tube, the bottom tube, as well as in between the Swingarm, so those areas are well protected. Well, maybe this one under a bottle cage is great as well, and I use Synchros protective kit. Basically, I chosen it because you don't need to bother your head to cut those into the pieces you need and then bend them. So it's just, in my opinion, even though it's pricey, it's worth the fact that you don't need to measure it and play around multiple hours to just make the fit. You just take it, apply it, and forget it. That's the way I think about it. If at some point you removed the Swingarm and you notice that in the rubber thing the cables are crossed, don't worry, it's by design, it should be this way. For me, at first it looks strange as well, and I know at least one guy who, after seeing that, made a switch and made the cables to go straight, so you shouldn't do that. Basically, these are for brakes, and if you have cable shifting, then it's for the shifter. Even though from the headset they come from the same place, from the right side, the brake hose goes at the right side, and then at the Swingarm it crosses to the outside, while the shifter, firstly from the right side, it goes to the left, and at the bottom it crosses to the cable. I would guess that it's to make sure the cables goes as straight into the Swingarm as possible, because if you guide it from the same side, keep in mind that they are both coming from the right, so it won't work in proper way. Yeah, there are some things which you should take care of, like greasing the pivot points when they come to you from the factory, because they used to be dry. But this thing, it's not messed up, so it should be crossed. It very much depends how the bike will last for you, depending on where you ride, how much you ride, and all those factors involved. There are a lot of parts which went to the warranty from my bike, starting from the brake levers to the damper on the fork, then twin lock, race face cranks, the shock is at the warranty as well, silver tone rear wheel is there because of the cracks near the spokes. The dropper is there as well. But keep in mind that this, we are talking about 30,000 kilometers driven on the bike. So for me, it's kind of surprising it lasted so relatively well, because the bike has been in many places. Actually, recently I have changed the shifter, even though the old one worked fine. I just compared how it feels and decided that probably it's the time to replace it. Maybe at some point when I don't have what to do, I just break it into pieces and see maybe it can be cleaned or whatever, but for now this will have the new shifter. In a separate video I will cover what the best upgrade was for the bike, and you might not necessarily see it in this setup, and it might necessarily not the wheels, which you have guessed it. So we will cover that. I also use power meters on this bike, it stages cranks. I will cover that in a separate video. Other than that, if you have any issues with Spark, you can leave a comment and I will help you the best I can. And also I have a lot of videos about maintaining the Spark. There are 2 other videos which covers after 3,000 kilometers, after 7,000 kilometers, and this one is after 30,000. So we will see whether it will last another season, but hopefully it will do. With that said, we'll meet in another video about, most importantly, the best upgrade I done for this bike. So we'll meet there.